I'm going to the garage, Carl said and looked at his wife. She was knitting. Are you sure? I'm sick of your garage. Samantha looked at him. What have you got against it? When I didn't have a garage, you kept telling me I wasn't doing anything, the man resented. I have nothing against your garage. I just do not understand why you bought it if you have no car or anything else. She looked at him sourly. It will be soon, Carl answered her immediately. Well, we'll see. Samantha smirked as she continued to knit. They had met back in high school. He'd pull her pigtails and she'd look back and scold him. And when they were in senior year, Carl once sat down at her desk and offered to help her do her algebra homework. Samantha really appreciated that at the time. She looked at the guy and didn't understand how she hadn't noticed it all these years. At graduation, the young people were already dancing together. That night, they watched the sunrise together. Mom, I think I met my man, she looked at her mother. Well, who is it? Carl from the parallel class. Oh, that kind boy. Yes, he is, the girl nodded her head. The time came when Carl had to leave for the army. Samantha was crying hard. She had promised him on the platform that she would wait for him. He asked not a promise, but he believed this girl would be faithful to him. And so it turned out. For 2 years they wrote letters to each other, and the confession of love and resentment, and they even quarreled once by correspondence. Carl decided not to take a leave of absence, so as not to lengthen his term of service, and when he returned, he saw her at the train station. He was walking toward her and smiling, and Samantha was running toward him. I told the truth. I waited. She hugged him. Samantha, I'm so happy. You're a miracle. He hugged her. They went home. Carl's mother knew that her son was coming and was preparing a surprise for them. Mommy, hi, the boy hugged his mother. I missed you so much. Hi, me too, my son. Where is your favorite? She asked slyly. Samantha, come on in. Mom knows you're here, Carl said loudly. The girl went into the apartment. She was noticeably shy. Hello. Hello, Samantha. Why are you so shy? We're all friends. They sat down at the table. Carl's mom served a hot meal. She baked some pies. At some point, the doorbell rang. Are you expecting someone? Carl looked at his mom. No, maybe I should have invited your friends over. When the door opened, Samantha's mother was standing on the doorstep. Mom, what are you doing here? Her daughter asked. And how could I not come in if my future son-in-law from the army came? She wondered. Everyone laughed. They invited the woman to the table. Everything was cordial and homely. Here, take the keys. Carl's mother handed him a bunch of keys. What is it? While you were in the army, I collected money and bought you an apartment. Thanks, but I can earn my own rent. Oh, come on. You have time to earn it. It's only a studio apartment. The woman smiled, stroked her son on the head. Thank you. It's very generous and most importantly a very necessary gift, smiled Carl. You're welcome. I think you'll like it. Maybe you will get married soon, now that you have a place to live. Carl took out a small ring from the inside pocket of his tunic. Samantha, will you be my wife? The girl began to cry. She had not even expected it. To be honest, when I went to pick you up at the station, I thought you would say something bad to me, she said and lowered her eyes. Come on. I love you. We communicated so much. You wrote me so much in letters. He took her in his arms and smiled. I love you, she whispered. And I love you. You have no idea how. The boy hugged her. The mothers looked at each other. There were tears of happiness in their eyes. One thought that her son had found a very good soulmate, and the other thought that her daughter had found her rock wall, behind which she could feel comfortable. So, when is the wedding? Carl's mom asked. In a month, probably, said the boy. He had no idea what the timeline was. Samantha sat in silence. She lowered her eyes and listened quietly. Why don't you say something, my daughter? You have to be happy. Cheerful. Her mother touched her hand. I do not know. I'm so happy. I don't even know what to say. This evening went very well. Samantha even thought it was not true what they say about mothers-in-law. Hers was very good. They didn't buy a wedding dress because Samantha's mother knew how to sew. Out of plain white fabric, she made her daughter a nice white dress. She bought white shoes and a veil to go with it. The wedding was very modest, just signed. The mothers were present. Samantha's friend and Carl's friend were also present. I don't need anything else. Samantha smiled at her new husband. Neither do I. As long as you are here, Carl hugged her. God, could it really be that good? She could not believe it. Well, apparently it can, Carl shrugged. Not even a year later, Samantha became pregnant. Her firstborn son, the heir, Brian, was born. Carl, are you happy about your son? Samantha asked him at night. Why do you ask that? Of course I wanted a son. I want you and me to have many children. Her husband looked at her. Everything was very good. If the baby cried at night, Samantha would get up to him the first time, Carl the second time. There were no disagreements in the family. The husband helped the young mother with everything. After a while, Samantha gave birth to a baby girl. You said you wanted another heir, Samantha laughed. Yes, but I already have an heir, and now my favorite princess has been born. Carl answered, smiling. The daughter was taken care of by everyone. Her grandmothers, her husband, and even her older brother thought he was a little bigger. The girl was named Layla. Layla, Layla, cried her brother. Layla. Her mother corrected him and stroked his head. She crouched down, feeling a heaviness in her lower abdomen. Layla was only a year old. Samantha was very afraid that she was pregnant again, and it turned out she was. Carl, I'm pregnant again. She looked at her husband. So that's good. There will be an extension of the lineage. That's our future. You should be very happy. Her husband looked at her, and again a son was born, and again the father was happy. But Samantha was not as happy with 3 children as she had been with her first. Because her husband was always at work, she had to do everything on her own. The only thing that helped her was a weekend trip to her grandmother's house. The eldest son, Brian, was left with one grandmother, Layla with another, and the third, Andrew, was taken with her. My dear, are you tired? The husband looked at her in the evening. No, I'm fine, Samantha answered, though it wasn't true. Why don't we go to the restaurant and leave the boys with their grandmothers? Let them spend the night there, and we'll get some rest, Carl suggested. No way can we go to restaurants now, a house full of kids. Time went on. The parents weren't getting any younger either. The time came when Brian had to go to first grade. Layla was also drawn to follow her brother. Soon she would be 2, and the younger Andrew wasn't far behind them. You know, I'm so tired, Samantha would sometimes sit down on the couch and say to her husband, and you think I'm not tired? You stay home all your life on maternity leave, and I work like hell. I don't have enough money, but what else can I do? He looked at her. And what should we do? She nodded her head. I do not know, just turned away, Carl. Their love they had in the beginning seemed to be gone, but they still continued to hold on to each other. A neighbor suggested buying a garage. Carl said one evening, What do you need it for? Samantha did not understand. Well, if we have a garage, we'll have a car, he answered optimistically. It's just like a single girl buying slippers and putting them at the front door. And soon she'll have a man, she said sarcastically. Well, why do you say that? Carl looked at her. You're not home all the time, and now this garage. You'll start doing things there, and I won't see you at all. All right, if you want, you can go there with me. No, I don't want to. They did buy the garage, and as soon as it arrived, Carl spent all his free time there. All Samantha would hear was, I'm going to the garage. I'm going to the garage. I'm in the garage. She didn't understand what he was doing in there. She didn't know. Samantha, don't worry about me so late. I'll stay in the garage, he called in the evening. What do you mean, stay in the garage? Well, it's just that I'm comfortable here, all the conditions. I will stay in the garage, he answered. Go home immediately, she shouted into the phone. You don't understand, he told her. I'll come and see what you're doing in the garage. Okay, I'll be right there. At some point, Carl began to travel frequently on business trips for his work. Will you pack my bags for me? Carl watched Samantha as she fried pancakes. Sure, but did they send you on another business trip? She was already doubting his words. Yes, do you not believe it? He couldn't understand. I do not know what to believe and what not. His wife looked at him with distrust. If you don't believe me, then call my boss. Carl gave her the phone. I'm not calling anywhere. Samantha put the phone away with her hand and gathered his things quietly. Once again, when Carl left, she called her friend. Laura, hi, do you want to get some rest today? She said. Sure, but you always put the kids first. You never went on rest with us, she answered. But today I will, Samantha told her. She called her mother and asked her to stay with the children, because Carl had left and she wanted to meet her friend. Sure, bring them to my place. I'm always glad to see them, Mama replied. The problem with the children was solved and Samantha and her friend met at the cafe. Listen, Laura, you know, my husband is always out at the garage. I don't understand if he had a car and was fixing it up there. I wouldn't worry, but he doesn't have a car. She looked at her friend. You just have to check it out. Go to the garage and find out what's going on, Laura advised her. Will you help me? Samantha asked. Of course, she smiled. That same evening, they took the keys to the garage and went there. When they opened the door, an empty space opened before them. There were shelves nailed on the sides, all very well equipped. There was a large leather couch against the wall. He told me he often rested here with his friends. Samantha looked at her friend. Well, look at the furnishings. She showed her hands. Yes, I can see it now. Good job on the shelves, but we don't even have anything to put in here, Samantha reasoned. Okay, come on. Did you bring champagne? Sure. Samantha pulled out 2 bottles of champagne and took out some plastic cups. They immediately opened it, poured, and drank. It's nice here, Laura said. They've got a grill here, and you can grill some meat. The couches are soft, Samantha nodded. Maybe they bring girls over here? Asked her friend. If there were girls, I'd know, Samantha frowned. Well, I don't know. If some friends of mine had it so good in the garage, I probably wouldn't mind coming here. Laura laughed. Come on, let's toast to us beautiful ones. Samantha walked up to her. Oh, look, what's that glittering on the wall? Asked her friend and walked over to the spot. I don't know, maybe it's jewelry, shrugged Samantha. I wish I had jewelry like that at home. Laura touched it. Just as she did so, something crunched somewhere. What is it? Samantha looked at her. I don't know. She shrugged. It feels like the walls are coming apart, said Samantha. Oh, you don't say. All the garages here are connected to each other, said the friend. Still, let me try. Samantha walked over to where her friend was standing. She grasped the shiny surface with her hands and turned it as far as it would go. The wall turned slightly. I told you there was something here. Samantha's eyes widened. Yes, I just didn't expect that. Laura was shocked. They pushed past the wall and saw a brightly lit room. There was a nice bed in the room, a desk. On it was a computer. There was also a chair. There was a TV on the wall. There was a shower stall and a bio toilet. Maybe this is your husband's office, suggested Laura. No, he has an office at home. Why would he need it? She shook her head. Who's there? A child's voice rang out. Oh, Laura shrieked. Who was that? Samantha asked. It's me. The boy got up from under the covers who was sleeping on the bed. Why did you turn the lights on in here? My God, what's going on in here? Laura didn't understand. I don't understand either. Tomorrow, Carl will come and I'll ask him. Samantha looked at her with big eyes. Are you all right? Laura ran up to the boy. Yes, I'm fine, he nodded, blinking his eyes. Doesn't anyone keep you here? Laura sat down and asked him. No, no one's keeping me here by force, the boy answered. Then what are you doing here? Samantha asked him. Sleeping, the boy looked at her. That much is clear. Tell us the truth. If someone is keeping you here, we'll let you out now and no one will hurt you anymore. Samantha spoke in a very quiet, calm voice. I'm all right. I'm waiting here for Daddy, the boy answered. The women looked at each other. They were shocked. What shall we do now? Samantha turned to him. Just get out of here and close this door, he answered. But we can't leave you here. You're sitting windowless, doorless, in one stuffy room. They looked at him. That's my problem. I'm fine with it. How did you get in here in the first place? The boy told them. We have keys. Samantha twirled the bundle in her hands. The girlfriends went out all done as they were in the garage. They returned home. Samantha sat in the kitchen. She couldn't wait for her husband to come back. When finally the key in the door turned, she was already standing in the hallway. Hi. What are you doing up? I'm waiting for you. Samantha looked at him with tearful eyes. What's wrong? He came over and hugged her. Carl, you and I have lived together for so many years. We have 3 children who need care. They want their mommy and daddy at home. Why are you doing this? I thought you were busy, but you. She couldn't get it through. You what? He didn't understand. You what? She looked at him. I went with Laura to your garage today. You have a secret room in there. What are you doing there with that little boy? Samantha screamed. She couldn't calm down. Tell me what you thought. What was I supposed to think? You kidnapped a boy and you're enjoying your pleasures with him? His wife answered him. What are you? Stupid? He grabbed her by the shoulders. What am I supposed to think? You have a secret room in your garage? A little kid sitting there? He's got everything. He hasn't told us anything. He doesn't want anything, so I can only come to one conclusion. His wife screamed in tears too. Let's sit down and I'll explain everything. Carl took her by the shoulders and put her on the bed. Listen to me, but don't swear. Her husband put his arm around her shoulders. Well, tell me already. Understand me if you can. A tear ran down his cheek. When you were pregnant the first time, my friends and I went to a cafe and at one point some girls came up to us. We got to know them, had drinks together. It was fun. Somehow, one of them happened to be on my lap at the end of the night. We were just talking, but it didn't look like anything was going to happen. But when everyone started to go home, I drove her up to the driveway and she offered to come in. I didn't say no, and I went. Carl looked down at the floor. Are you telling me that while I was suffering giving birth to your son, you were cheating on me? Do not shout. You'll wake the children. Her husband reassured her. How could I not scream? I thought we had love and there would be no betrayals between us. I don't understand how this could have happened. We went over to her house and she printed out some wine. We had a glass each. I woke up the next morning in her bed. He looked into his wife's eyes. So did you go on seeing each other? Samantha was standing in front of him with her hands at her sides. No, I never saw her again. But I found out years later that I got her pregnant. I don't know what had happened to her, but she'd given up on a baby in the maternity ward. I rushed out to find him. There was a lot to do, and by some happy coincidence I found out that David was in an orphanage. I went there right away. Carl stopped talking. And what did they tell you there? Samantha couldn't wait. They said they wouldn't give the baby away. If I want to adopt him, my wife and I have to go and get all the papers and officially adopt the boy. He said and looked at his wife, scared. Every day I went to the orphanage, watched the kids play on the playground. We had already gotten to know the boy. Whenever he saw me, he would run to me and we would talk through the bars. Well, tell me more. What are you waiting for? Samantha couldn't wait for his answer. Yes, I'm sorry to you. Then I bought the garage. No one suggested it to me, just a plan matured in my head. I quickly found an ad that someone was selling a garage near our house. I spent a long time there setting up a room for him. And then one day, I went to the orphanage, and when they were walking in the playground, I called David over to me. I asked him if he would come with me, and he nodded in response. We held hands and walked out of there. I took the boy to the garage. So you're saying you stole this kid from the orphanage? They're looking for him right now. The woman grabbed her head. Yes, I know they're looking for him, but they'll never find him. What are you talking about? She did not understand. Do you think he's going to live in that garage all his life? Why not? Every weekend I go to see him. We go for walks in the park, go on rides. I'll introduce Brian to him later. Carl looked up at her. How can it be? When did you have time to do all this? Do not shout, I'm sorry. There are no other people's children. He's mine, and you have to take it. Carl sighed. Samantha left for the kitchen. She couldn't comprehend what her husband had just told her. She dialed her friend's number, determined to consult with her. The women agreed to meet at a coffee shop that was near their house. Samantha looked at her friend. Can you imagine what my quiet husband, who had never heard of flying his life, has done? He kidnapped a boy from an orphanage. Samantha cried again. Calm down, honey. It's okay. You need to think over it and decide whether or not to accept this boy. And if you do, you should just let him out. The orphanage will think it was an escape. You and Carl will get all the paperwork together and they'll officially release him to you. You have a family with 3 children and a 4th will be given to you. Lana looked at her. What are you talking about? This baby is from another woman that Carl cheated on me with while I was pregnant, Samantha declared. I don't see any other way. Laura shook her head. There was nothing to do. Samantha returned home. She couldn't look at her husband. She imagined him hugging another woman, and it disgusted her. That night they slept apart. When her husband came in and kissed her and made her coffee, she turned back against the wall. Honey, I realize what I've done, but Carl David is my son. I care about him. Why should a boy be brought up in an orphanage if he has a father? He didn't understand. I understand, but I cannot accept it, Samantha said and turned away, tears welling up in her eyes. Have you forgiven me? Carl sat down on the bed. I forgave you a long time ago because I love you. The woman stroked his head. What are we going to do? He took her by the hand. I consulted with a friend yesterday. It would be better for him to go back to the orphanage and say he ran away from there himself. Then we'll gather the papers and go there and officially adopt this boy. Samantha nodded her head. You're my good one. They did everything just as Samantha said. David went back to the orphanage. Everyone there just wondered how such a little boy could run so long in the middle of nowhere. Did anything happen to you? David, tell me. Why did you do that? The teacher asked. I do not want to talk to anyone. The boy did not look at her. And 2 days later, Samantha and Carl came and said they wanted to adopt a baby. They brought them some boys and girls to choose from just for them. I saw a white-haired boy running around the building. We'd like to talk to him, Carl said. He's a troubled kid. He ran away from us a while ago. He came back yesterday. If you adopt him, I can't guarantee that he won't be a problem, the woman said as she looked at them. I insist that we talk to the boy. Very well. Please call David, she said to the woman at the door. All right, she nodded and went away. A few minutes later, she returned with David on her arm. The boy looked at his father. He knew him and was not afraid. His gaze fell on Samantha. What are you doing here? The boy was frightened. Do you know him? The principal asked Carl. Carl didn't know what to think of. Yes, I've seen this boy, the man said quickly. The kid was begging outside the store and I was buying him candy. Oh, I see, the principal nodded her head. So are you okay with us adopting David? Carl turned his attention back on himself. Get the paperwork together and we'll be happy to help you, the woman said. Okay, and when can we pick him up? Samantha looked to the principal. Yeah, when you have the paperwork done. But in the meantime, you can take the boy for a weekend to get to know him better. What a nice place you have here. David looked around in the kitchen. Wait, that's nothing. Let's sell the garage and buy ourselves a new apartment. Carl answered and smiled. In the evening, the whole family got together. Also, all the grandmothers came. They were very surprised by the event that happened in the family. Well, Carl, you made a mess. His mother-in-law looked at him. Yes, I agree. It was my fault, but if it hadn't happened, David wouldn't be in our house right now. He stroked the guy's head. The papers were collected. David was officially adopted. Carl even had a DNA test done to prove to everyone that this was his real son. Somehow, it just happened that the money came out of nowhere. Carl got a good order, and after completing it, he was given a bonus. It was enough to add on and buy a bigger apartment after he sold it. Are you not going to sell your garage? His wife looked at him. Let's wait. Let it stand. Carl waved his hand. All right, suit yourself, but be warned, I know about your secret room. She wagged her finger at him. Enough about that. Carl lowered his eyes. He was ashamed of what he had done. The years passed. The children were in school. Brian and David were in the same class. One day, Samantha saw that her eldest son had a black eye. Did you have a fight with someone? She asked Brian. Don't pay attention. Her son waved. How is it not paying attention? David, did you see who he was fighting with? The woman turned to her other son. I didn't see anything, he muttered. 2 weeks passed after this conversation. In the evening, Samantha cooked for them in the kitchen. The younger children were doing their homework. Her husband was still out. Brian and David hadn't come in yet either. I'm here, I heard from the hallway. Carl, have you seen Brian and David in the yard? The woman asked worriedly. What do you mean? They haven't come back from school yet. No, Samantha shook her head. I haven't seen them, but I'll go look in the yard. Carl put on his shoes and left the apartment. There was no one in the yard, but it was too early to panic. He came home and said that the boys were at an age where they could go for a walk. He went into the kitchen and sat down to dinner. Samantha put his food down, made him some tea, and sat down on the stool herself. Carl could see that she was worried. Don't be so worried. He took her hands. My darling, you know, my heart is not in place. Do you think something happened? He didn't understand. When night fell and the boys still hadn't come home, everyone was getting worried. The grandmothers were gathered in the apartment. The children were awake. We have to call the police, Samantha cried. Come on, they'll be back, and we'll be famous all over town. My son is missing, don't you understand? Screamed the woman. Okay, nodded her mother-in-law. They called the police. They arrived at their apartment 10 minutes later. They took all the statements and pictures of the guys and left. No one showed up during the night. In the morning, a shattered David came home. David, where have you been? And where is Brian? Samantha fell to her knees in front of him. How should I know where your Brian is? I haven't seen him at all. He brushed her off and wanted to go to his room. No, wait, she took his hand. Have you not seen him? You are in the same class. You were supposed to go home together. Samantha knew she was talking loudly, but she couldn't help it. Leave me alone. He looked at everyone sideways. The police arrived near lunchtime. You know, one son came back and the other son didn't. Don't worry. We'll question the child now. Maybe something will turn up, said the man in uniform. Carl, how long had you been in your garage? It suddenly dawned on Samantha. No, why would I go there now? He looked at her. It's urgent. Let's go to the garage. The woman grabbed her coat. They arrived at the garage. They opened the doors, and the woman saw traces of blood on the floor. Her heart began to beat faster. She went over to the opposite wall, grabbed the shiny thing, and turned it as far as it would go. The wall slid away. Wow, one of the cops said. Okay, We'll talk later. Carl looked at him. In a small room with no windows or doors, a boy was lying on a bed. The pillow was all red and wet. My son, my boy. The mother collapsed on the bed, but the boy was unconscious. Get him to the hospital right away, shouted one of the policemen. The brigade arrived very quickly. They loaded the boy on a stretcher and took him to the hospital. Doctor, what's wrong with my son? Samantha Rance wore the man in the white coat. He has lost a lot of blood. We lost time. Tell me what happened to him. Samantha was about to faint. He's got a head wound. We're doing everything we can. What? A head wound? Unfortunately, it's true. I'm sorry, I have to go. She took a seat on a table outside her son's room. Shut him, she repeated, unable to comprehend what was going on. Samantha came to her herself for a while and drove home. She really hoped that David would enlighten them on the story. She told them at home all that the doctor had explained to her. At this point, David cried. Why are you crying? Come on, tell me. Samantha ran up to him. Don't scare the guy. Carl stopped her. Get off. And if you hadn't brought that kid home, nothing would have happened to my son, she shouted. Come on, tell me. The woman continued to tower over the boy. I don't know anything. David shook his head. And if you don't tell me what happened right now, I will turn you into the police. Samantha threatened him. David cried again. Yesterday, when we went with him from school, the boys called him to a construction site. There was a showdown there, the boy began to say. So you went there? Yes, we did. They started calling me names and Brian didn't even stand up for me, David said. And you shot him for that? With what? Where did you get that? Samantha started yelling again. Calm down, let him talk. Her husband stopped her. When it was all over at the construction site and everyone left, I asked Brian why he didn't stand up for me. After all, I'm his brother. He looked at me, laughed, and said I wasn't his brother. Then we went home. I had the keys to my father's garage, and I called Brian there. The boys sobbed. And what did you do to him? Samantha couldn't stand it. She ran up to him again. I didn't do anything to him. I had a toy gun, but the boys converted it to shoot iron bullets. I didn't think it would be like this. David cried again. What are you talking about? How could you shoot your brother? She didn't understand. I was very angry. When I pointed the gun at him, I didn't think it would work out like that. The bullet went right through his eye. I actually thought he was dead, so I dragged him into this room and locked him in. Then I walked around town for a long time, afraid to go home. David said, Why didn't you tell us what you had done in the first place? Samantha cried and fell into a chair. I was afraid, David said honestly. You were afraid, and my son is dying now. The woman looked at him with a hateful look. There are always fights between children. Carl came up to her. Let's hope for the doctors. He's alive. It could be worse. Should I thank your son? She looked at her husband. You know how it could have turned out. You're the father of that bastard. I don't want to see you in this apartment anymore. Get out of here. She pointed at the door. Her mother-in-law ran up to her and tried to calm her down. Samantha, what on earth are you talking about? She said. And you go with them too, she cried. Only Samantha and her mother remained in the house, and the young children were already asleep. Mom, I'll probably go to the hospital, she said. Yes, daughter, go. I'll stay and watch the children, the woman nodded. Samantha arrived at the hospital. It turned out that Nikolai had a very rare blood type, and they could not find a donor. She called Carl, among others. Look, David has the same blood type, Carl said. When we took the DNA test, they told us that my son had a very rare blood type. Bring him here right away, shouted the woman. When David was brought to the hospital, it turned out that he and his brother had the same blood type, so he donated to his brother. A few days later, Samantha was allowed to visit her son. He was moved from the ICU to a regular room. Brian, are you okay? His mother ran up to him. Mom, I'm fine. Don't blame David. It's my own fault. I'm fine. I'm better now. He straightened the bandage on his head. How can it be okay? You could have lost an eye. Thank God you're alive, roared Samantha. That's what I needed. Now I'll know not to behave that way. Her son looked at her. Samantha sat by the bed, crying. She did not know what to do next. Mom, she heard her daughter's voice. Layla, how are you here? She did not understand. Grandma brought us here. The faces of relatives were already peering into the room. All right, come in. I think Brian will be happy to see you all. Samantha nodded. When everyone was in the room, the door opened again and her mother-in-law came in. Can I come in? She asked and looked at her daughter-in-law. Of course, come in. She smiled. At the very end they were joined by Carl and David. At first Samantha frowned, but when she realized that there was nothing that could be done, she changed from anger to mercy. Hello. The doctor entered the room. He did not take his eyes off of some papers. Hello, greeted them all together. The doctor even jumped a little. Oh my God, what a big family you have. He patted the boy on the shoulder. What do you say? Samantha looked at the doctor. It's all right. The eye is intact. The metal ball missed. Didn't hurt the apple itself. The doctor concluded. That's good. Samantha buried herself in her son's arms and kissed him. I think you will be able to take him home in a week. The doctor smiled. That's very good news. Samantha exhaled. Now go. Brian needs rest. The doctor said quietly. Samantha gave her son one more kiss and they all left the room. Come on, I need to talk to you. She called David after her in the hospital corridor. He turned on his father, unsure of what to do. Go. The man nodded. Samantha and David stepped back. She sat him down on the table. She knelt down to be at the same level with him. I'm sorry I snapped, but you have to understand, I was very afraid for Brian's life. Look, you have parents now. You're not alone in this life anymore. From now on, no matter what happens to you, you can always come to us. You don't have to hide anything. We are your closest people. We will always understand and support you. She told him and he just nodded. David, look at me. She shook him. Okay. He looked up, his eyes full of tears. Mom, I'm sorry. I love you. These warm words the woman heard from the boy for the first time. She put her arms around him and they cried together. We are family. No matter what happens, we must always be together. She told David. Let's go to the others.